Hi, can I get my panelists to turn on their cameras? Hello. Okay, so a very good afternoon to all of you. Thank you for your patience for waiting. My name is Rena, and I am actually a programmer here at Scape. And I would like to welcome all of you to our third Scape Dance Science webinar. And in today's topic, we will be talking about footwear and their relationship with floorings. Now, this is an interactive webinar, and there will be polls for you to participate in. So let's try one out right now. Okay. So just make sure you tick everything. And yeah, so the first question is, can you hear me? If you can hear me, tick yes. If you can't hear me, you probably have to adjust your speakers a little bit. Now, the second question is, do you know what dance science is? And the last question is, did you attend our previous webinar titled Injury Prevention with Dr. Mandy Zhang, who is our returning speakers today? Okay, thank you all. Everyone can hear me just fine, which is great. Now, for those of you who do not know what dance science is about, it is actually an emerging area of research study where scientific principles are applied to enhance dance performance, identify ways to reduce injuries, help with safe return to dance post-rehabilitation, and also safe dance practice. So today we have Dr. Mandy Zhang, an associate consultant at Singapore Sports and Exercise Medicine Center at Changi General Hospital. Would you like to give our attendees a wave? And then we also have Vivien Koh, who is a physiotherapist at Moving Space Sports and Physiotherapy. Actually, she's also a professional point shoe fitter. And last but not least, we have Rochelle Yap, who is going to be moderating our session. Rochelle is a freelance commercial dancer, instructor, and also choreographer. I would also like to give a big shout out to Ika Dancewear, who has kindly prepared an exclusive discount code, and we'll be giving out a set of Ika Dancewear that's worth $100 to a lucky attendee at the end of the session. However, in order to qualify for that, you have to follow Ika Dancewear on Instagram, and if you haven't done so, you may do so now. The link is actually available in the chat. Now, before we start the session, I would like to let all of you know that your video and audio are not activated and will remain that way throughout the webinar. So if you would like to raise some questions, you can submit them to the Q&A section that's located at the bottom of your screen. If there's any interesting question posed by someone else, you may upvote them with the thumbs up function. For any comments or technical difficulties experienced, you can submit them via the chat box. Now I'll hand the session over to Rochelle. Thank you very much.
Myself. All right, hello everybody. Okay, so I guess we'll start by maybe letting Dr. Mandy and Vivien introduce themselves. So just tell us a bit about your background and the area that you are interested in. Maybe we'll
Hi
start with Dr. Mandy.
everyone.
Yes.
Hi everyone. Hi, I'm Mandy. I'm an associate consultant in Singapore Sport and Exercise Medicine Center. I'm currently based in Changi General Hospital as well as Sengkang General Hospital. I have an interest in performing arts medicine. So thank you for joining us today, and I hope you enjoy our talk.
All right, over to Vivien.
Hello, my name is Vivien. I'm a physiotherapist at Moving Space. So I mostly do musculoskeletal and sports physiotherapy with special interest in dance physiotherapy. Yeah. So yes, hopefully y'all sort of gain something from our talk today.
Okay, cool. So basically for myself, I teach heels, jazz, and I started ballet and contemporary. So I think I've been all over the spectrum. So for today, I'm most interested in finding out how all these various footwears that I've tried in my life, and like I'm sure a lot of dancers have tried in their life, kind of like affect our bodies, of course, and how we're going to sustain them in the long run if we're going to use all these footwear and the floorings that we dance on as well, like how we are going to basically protect our bodies for the long run. Yeah. All right. So Dr. Mandy and Dr. Vivien has put together a presentation for us to better understand specific footwear, such as difference in ballet flats, heels, footwear for street dancers, and as well as point shoes. So maybe we'll start with that. Dr. Mandy, are you ready?
Yep, just let me share my screen.
All right.
Okay, can you see this? Okay. So hi everyone, thank you, and I welcome all of you today to join us in this webinar on footwear and flooring. I would like to thank the organizers for extending their invitation, and a very big appreciation to Charmaine, Reina, Farah, Rocio for putting in such a big effort to get the Scape Dance articles and webinar going. Now, so we're talking about shoes, and if I ask, how many times have you asked yourself, are dance shoes really that important? Or how many times have you asked yourself that maybe I shouldn't be spending so much money on dance shoes because I already have some other shoes I can use? So Marilyn Monroe once quoted, "Give the girl the right shoes and she can conquer the world." In the same vein, in dance, give the girl the right shoe and she can shine. A proper dance shoe will give you the right amount of traction to sashay and move across the floor and practice the skills without having to think so much about the shoes. In essence, the shoe should be thin enough to feel connected to the floor, but padded enough to make sure that hours of dancing can be enjoyable and pain-free. There are different types of footwear used in dance. And as Rosho said, a lot of us cover different dance, and dancers are often versatile and tries different dance genre during their lifetime. So in my presentation, I will cover mainly ballet slippers, heels, and sneakers. And later in the presentation, physiotherapist Vivien will cover the point preparedness. Ballet slippers. So there are typically two types of materials for ballet slippers, leather and canvas. These shoes are thin and light with thin sole for maximal flexibility, but there are pros and cons for each type. The leather can be cleaned easily with a damp cloth if it gets dirty, and it can stretch with your foot and grow in a growing foot. Hence, it is recommended for young dancers who are just starting out and they are still in that growing phase. Canvas shoes, on the other hand, hugs the foot beautifully and displays the line of the foot. It does not stretch, and hence it should fit comfortably the first time upon fitting. This type of shoes are mainly recommended for adults. In addition, canvas shoes can be washed and air dried when dirty, whereas the leather shoes can't. There is also satin shoes, which is commonly used for formal performance but wears out quite fast. So using what type of shoes also depends on what flooring one is using. If you're dancing on the marley floor, the one on the left, then canvas shoes may be preferred because leather has a tendency to stick on the floor. If you are dancing on wood floor, then leather shoes may be preferred as it provides more traction. Vivien will go through more of the different types of flooring later. If you look at the sole of the ballet flat then, you will see either a split sole or a full sole. The sole provides a protective layer of cushioning. And before split soles were invented, dancers would often fold and crease their full sole to make their arches more flexible and seen. This full sole provides additional support to the arch and force the dancer to work with the foot through the floor while building strength. Full sole also provides balance and stability and is recommended for those beginners as well as children. The split soles, on the other hand, allows the dancer to better articulate their feet and accentuate that beautiful arch of theirs as they point their feet. These are recommended for advanced dancers who have better balance and stability. And as progression, the child should start with a full sole, and when their tendons and muscles are developed, to progress to split sole at about age 11 or later. In today's world, we also have this hybrid shoe, which creates the best of both worlds by allowing the sole to have both a full sole and a split sole. If we zoom into the sole, you can see two parts of the sweet sole. I'm not sure if this is the best picture as the left foot seems sickled and you should not really quite go on point with a full point on ballet slippers. Another hybrid pair is this MDM Intrinsic ballet slipper. I'm not sure if any of you have seen it before, but the striking feature is the bright pink sole in the shoe. This is a padded neoprene, full sole on the inside and provides the dancer with some base support. The addition of this neoprene full sole is thought to provide more shock absorption for landing and help the dancer with sensory feedback. If you look on the outside, then there is a split sole. And I first saw this at a dance conference in Finland, and they said that they had plans to bring it to Singapore, but I'm not sure if it's in yet. However, with all types of shoes, most importantly, you will need to make sure that you dance in them and make sure that they are right for you. Now, we all want that beautiful arch, the ideal ballet foot and the high arch with high instep, sometimes referred to the banana foot. Unfortunately, genetics determines a large part of your arches. However, strength and flexibility can improve with training, but that's within the limits of your individual anatomy. Nonetheless, there are some routines that may help you journey to a beautiful ballet feet. So here I have 5 exercises for you to improve strength and mobility in the foot. I would like to take the next few minutes to go through some of these exercises. If you're at home and without shoes, voila, let's get ready. And if you have a piece of cloth or towel around you, grab it quickly and let's get started with some of these exercises. Rosho has kindly volunteered to demonstrate. So if you need some live demonstration, please tune in to her video pin. Right, so the first exercise is doming. This doming exercise helps to engage and strengthen the foot's intrinsic muscle. So if I could get you to sit on the floor on a chair with your feet flat on the ground, lift your metatarsal knuckles while gliding the toes towards your heel, creating a dome with your foot. Do not curl your toes, but rather keep them long and flat. Now in this position, keeping your toes straight, slide them back down along the floor to a flat foot. Now lift your toes up, but not the ball of your foot, off the floor, and then lower them back down again. So it may take a while to get used to it, but this helps to build the dome and your intrinsic muscles, which can be quite good. Now we'll move on to Theraband exercises. So I'm not sure whether Rosho has a Theraband, but maybe a towel or cloth will do. Now this exercise helps to strengthen the feet and the ankles. So I'll get you to loop the band around the ball of your foot and straighten your knees. Now, slowly point and flex the foot, working through demi-point and making sure that your ankles do not sickle in. So you want to do this against resistance and practice for about 10 to 20 repetitions using a medium strength band. Excellent. Okay, now we'll go on to piano toes. So if I get Rosho to stand up and go and do a Tandu Alasagon. Okay, and flex the foot off the floor. And now articulate the toes into a point one at a time, starting with the 5th toe, 4th toe, 3rd toe, and big toe. So ideally you want to kind of like do like a piano key, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Yes. Yeah, like a piano key. Yeah. So you really want to work each toe at a time. And this would help with some of the little toe muscles that you have. Okay. The next one, we'll do a towel scrunching. So grab a towel, a blanket or shirt and lay it on the floor. You want to be able to grab the cloth with your toes while sitting down. Next, only using your toes, gather up the towel until there's no more to grab. And now start to keep pulling in the towel towards you until there's no towel left. So keep pulling, scrunch, scrunch, scrunch. Yeah, good. The towel might be a little thick, but yeah, that's what we want to see. Great, and then you move towards the end of it. Excellent, okay. Now we move on to the next exercise. So we're going to try pointing with a relaxed calf. And this can be quite challenging to some because this exercise works more of the motion in the front of your foot rather than muscling your calf muscles. So if I can get you to sit with the leg cross-legged across your knee and push your heel down to keep your Achilles lengthened throughout the exercise. I want you to isolate your calf muscles and try to contract and relax on its own without moving your foot. So just squeeze and relax your calf muscles without moving your foot. Now, wiggle and squeeze your calf to ensure that it is soft before you move on. I want you to use the other hand to try pushing down on the big toe knuckle only and keeping the calf relaxed. The other toes should stay long and flexed up. So bring your other toes flexed up towards the ceiling. Good. Now gradually starting to point by the ball of your foot. Keep your toes up and your calf soft. Keep going. So keep pointing your toes, starting with the ball of the foot, going slowly and surely. If the calf becomes tense, stop and shake it off because you don't really want to work the calf, right? And now we go back to pushing down the big toe and starting to point with the ball of your feet again. And once you've pointed your feet as far as you can with a relaxed calf, you may then point the toes, but don't curl them up. And to get the final bit of point, use your hands to stretch out the top of your arch. So practice this whole series slowly on each foot. You can repeat it about 8 to 10 times on each side. And this really works some of the little muscles that you tend to compensate with just using the calf muscles. Thanks, Rocio. I'll move on. Okay, great. So we'll move on to heels now. So just a fun fact, but did you know that heels were first worn by men? Persian soldiers were the first to discover that heeled shoes helped them stay in their stirrups and give them the stability when they needed to shoot their arrows and bows. And heels was a wonderful thing in the past. It symbolizes high social stature, military prowess, and refined fashionable taste. As such, King Louis XIII was perhaps the most famous wearer of the heels in history. And in 1670, he passed an edict that stated only nobility could wear heels. But now heels are worn commonly by anyone. And high heels are a powerful symbol of modern female sexuality and shown to increase women's attractiveness and exaggerate the prototypical feminine gait. And here are some of the different dance genres that use heels. But what happens to the body posture when wearing heels? With flat shoes, the spine is fairly relaxed and straight and the calf muscles relaxed. With high heels, the center of gravity is displaced forward and there's increased plantar flexion with pressure on the balls of the feet through a downward force. There is also increased knee flexion and tight hip flexors, as well as an increased curvature of the spine. The general biomechanics of high heels result in sometimes a bit of a slower, self-selected walking speed, shorter strides. There is increased energy cost and expenditure with increased heel height, and a larger braking force is required. You will have sensed this if you tried coming to an abrupt stop in heels versus being in barefoot. A large number of studies also reported increased muscle activity in the neck and lower back, which increases with heel height. This increase in lumbar muscle activation can lead to increased spine compression, causing fatigue and low back pain, and hence it's important to do exercises that routinely strengthens the core and pelvic muscles. With high heels, the knee is also more flexed when the feet contact the ground. The amount of knee flexion increases with the heel height. There is also increased quads activation and joint loading with increasing tibial-femoral compressive forces contributing to knee pain. When compared to heels of 9 cm versus 1.2 cm, there was about a 90% increase in peak patellofemoral stress in the 9 cm shoes. Forefoot forces also increases with heels. Force concentration, shear stress, and loading rate at the first metatarsal increases with wearing of heels. High heels also causes decreased subtalar joint pronation and internal tibial rotation due to a more plantar flex feet. There is also increased muscle activation of the calf muscles and increased energy expenditure with higher likelihood of fatigue. If we look at this study on the biomechanical effects of wearing heels at 0 centimeters, 4.5 and 8 centimeters, muscle activity at the back or the erector spinae increases with heel height increase. Muscle activity in the tibialis anterior, which is at the front of your ankle, also increases as the heel height increase. And it was reported that lumbar flexion angle decreased with increasing heel height. When we look at some of the injuries associated with high heels, this is the first systematic review on high heels and musculoskeletal injuries published in 2016. 18 studies were included, and there was a significant association of Hallux valgus or bunion, but no association with osteoarthritis. Now let's just zoom into Hallux valgus, or otherwise known as bunion, for a bit. It's relatively common in our population, with a prevalence of 23% in 18 to 65-year-old. The pathophysiology of Hallux valgus is complex, but there is an imbalance between the intrinsic and extrinsic muscles of the foot and ligaments. In this condition, the toe deviates laterally towards the outer part of the body, and the first metatarsal deviates towards the center of the body. There are multiple proposed theories, such as the genetics, a short first metatarsal, forefoot varus, pes planus, which is flat foot, or joint hypermobility. We often hear that Hallux valgus deformity is common in people who wear tight shoes and heels, and is often cited a cause. However, men who wear sensible shoes without heels uncommonly have Hallux valgus deformity as well. Hence, footwear is thought to exacerbate the underlying foot deformity rather than acting as a primary cause for Hallux valgus.
May I just cut in for a second, Doctor?
Sure,
Yeah.
sure.
So I personally have quite bad bunions, and it was rumored that it was because I was wearing point shoes when I was young, and then when I grew up, I started doing heels a lot. Would you say that was the cause of it?
Yeah, so if we go back to some of the studies, we find a big association of heels and bunions. But then when we looked at it more in depth, it seemed that there was a genetic, there's an increased influence from a genetic predisposition. So for example, if your parents had Hallux valgus, then you would probably have inherited that as well. And that I wanted to reinforce that, it seemed that footwear was thought to exacerbate Hallux valgus rather than footwear being the primary cause for Hallux valgus.
Such as transfer of weight and how you use your muscles and how it affects whether it grows out so much or so little.
Yes.
Okay. Maybe at this point we maybe open up a poll for everybody, just to get everybody interactive. So at this point, could we get our admin to open up our second poll? So the first question would be, what is your relationship with dance? Just so that we have a consensus on what our audience is today. So are you pre-professional dancer, dance hobbyist, dance educator? You do things related to dance, or are you completely not a dancer? Second question would be, which dance genre do you practice? And last two questions is, what sort of footwear do you dance with, as well as, is proper footwear important for you? Let's give everyone 2 minutes to give their answers for the poll. And if, let's say, there are any sort of footwear or dance genres that you feel unmentioned in the poll, you can also raise them up, note them down now, and later during the Q&A, you can also raise them up if you have any questions regarding those. I don't know about you, but I'm learning a lot.
Good to hear.
Give everyone a couple more minutes. All right, is everybody ready? Hopefully everybody is ready. All right. Shall we move on? All right, thank you.
Okay,
What a
so
poll. Okay, cool.
would I move on, or would you go through the polls?
We can for a minute. So we have quite a few dance hobbyists. We have quite a few ballet and contemporary. Oh, actually quite a few street dance as well. So later we will touch on street dance footwear, so sneakers and everything. So you can look out for that. And oh, quite all around our footwear usage. Great. Thank you everyone for your results. Yes, Dr. Mandy, you may continue. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So with high heels, there is an increased pressure over the first metatarsal and some limited range of motion. And there can be resultant forces moving the first metatarsal medially and dorsally. This force can increase the hallux angle, and there is a progression where the medial capsule becomes strained and may then lead to rupture. So without the stabilizing structures medially, the lateral structures of the adductor hallucis continues to pull the toe away from the center and may exacerbate this deformity. So shoes and narrow toe boxes can add on pressure to the foot's medial aspect. People with hallux valgus often present with foot deformity, so they often say my foot looks weird. It can also pose a difficulty in finding shoe wear because of the bone prominence. There can be pain on the medial side of the foot because of bursitis, as well as some skin irritation or callus. There also can be some compression of the toe nerves, causing tingling sensation towards the toes. So over here, I thought I'll just run through some of the preventive tips to avoid getting a bunion early. So first, shoes should be comfortable as soon as you buy them. Most of the time, don't expect to be able to break into the shoes. Do try to alternate heel heights from time to time. It is also important to understand the slope of the shoe is more important than the heel height when it comes to comfort. Look at the platform and decrease the angle between the heel and the ball of the foot. Having a platform though may decrease your connection with the ground. Also have a habit to stretch out your toes at the end of the day by spreading your toes outwards and stretching the big toe. Always give tender loving care to your feet and give it a break from heels from time to time. In this 2016 study on non-surgical treatment of hallux valgus, they recommended footwear modification, orthotic device, NSAIDs, and corticosteroid injections for bursitis. Some of the exercise for mobility and flexibility to include stretching of the calf muscles, strengthening of the intrinsic foot muscles, so by doing the dome exercises as well as the toe scrunching, and working the abductor hallucis muscle. Toe spacers were used to improve the metatarsophalangeal joint and can be recommended for those deformity which is still flexible and can be moved into neutral position. However, to note, in a study on effects on toe separator on painful hallux valgus, it was found that these insole and toe separators significantly reduced pain intensity and was a good option for pain reduction, but it was not effective in improving the deformity itself. Other practical treatment or considerations during dance would be to lower the heel height when you have a symptomatic flare. Choose a pair of heels with wide toe box and multiple vamps that can accommodate your bunion. And wear a shoe padding with your heels to reduce inflammation and friction. If the hallux valgus is unable to be treated conservatively or there is persisting pain, bunion surgery may be recommended. But in an article by dance medicine specialist, a foot and ankle surgeon in USA, Dr. Nancy Cadell, she recommended that surgery, where possible, should be avoided until time of retirement in professional dancers. This is due to the inability to regain sufficient flexibility of the first metatarsophalangeal joint after hallux valgus surgery. Hematol is another toe deformity that has an abnormal bend in the middle joint of the foot, and this can be a painful condition. Some of the causes, it can be multifactorial, but can also be due to ill-fitting or tight shoes that tend to compress the toes. Having a high-heeled shoes especially also lead to a transfer of pressure to the forefoot. Having hallux valgus and extra bony prominence or a long second metatarsal also compresses the space in front of the shoe box. Other conditions include rheumatoid arthritis, destruction of the metatarsophalangeal joints. Some of the tips to work on to prevent hematols. So an appropriate shoe fit is important. It should not be too tight or too narrow. When wearing heels, think of long toes and keeping the toes flat and long on the ground. Trying to avoid gripping the ground and crunching your toes, and keep checking in with yourself. Another common technique mistake, which I was also guilty of, is to point far and not point down. So if we look at some of these photos on the right, the top photo shows a long pointed foot with the top of the foot stretched, the arch is contracted, and the toes are pointed far. So as you point your foot, think far and reaching out far rather than thinking down. Yeah. The bottom photo shows an improperly pointed foot while the arch is engaged and the toes are curled downwards, and the top of the foot is not lengthened. Some of the other treatments, so once again, lower your heel height if you have symptomatic hematols. If you do already have this deformity, choose a comfortable shoe with deep, high, and broad shoe box to accommodate your toes. Don't try and squeeze into something that your toes can't fit. Also, if you do have corns and calluses, get it trimmed by a professional, and you may want to consider some padding over the corns and calluses. If they are still flexible, taping can be an option. And go back to some of the strength and mobility exercises like the tower curls and the marble pickups. Last resort would be surgery. Now, going to a heels class for the first time can be daunting. And the right shoe will make you feel very much more secure and confident regardless of your dance level. And there are so many to choose from, but where do we start? So first, choose the right heel height. The higher the heel, the harder to dance. So if you are a beginner, start with something lower, approximately 2-inch will do, and then work your way up. A small platform on the sole can help you to get more used to height, but avoid too thick a platform because ideally you want to be able to feel the floor and feel connected to the ground. Thicker heels give the dancer more support, and it will be easier to dance in this type of heels. Some heels for dancing also have laces, and laces allow you to adjust the tightness of the shoe that gives adequate support to the ankles. Alternatively, a crisscross X strap can also be an alternative. The fit. So ensure that upon fitting your shoes while standing, the shoes are at the very edge of the shoes. Sometimes about a quarter inch past the shoe is also acceptable. The style, it depends, but if you have high arch, a T strap can be quite constrictive and may not be too suitable. And if you have small toes that tends to pop out of the vams, then you may want to consider something with a mesh over. These are
Hi,
some
sorry,
general.
may I just
Hi.
ask the question regarding shoes? This is my personal question
Sure.
actually. Do you have any opinions for peep toe, like open toe shoes versus like closed toe heels?
Yes. So the peep toes are better for. So say if you have a longer second metatarsal. So you look at your toes and your second toe is longer, then you
Yep.
may prefer the pig toes as compared to a narrow, a closed toe box because it would compress. The other thing is bunions, or you have some toe deformities. You want to give it a bit more space. I
Ah,
personally have bunions, and even for my vans that I use for my shoes, I have to choose one that fits nicely where my bunion is and it doesn't compress
mm,
on it. Yeah.
same,
So
same,
yeah,
same
yeah.
problem.
So they can come in different forms, but yeah, really trying, and it may be the same type, but from shoe to shoe there might be a bit of a variance as well.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, so here I have some general exercises for high heel lovers. So the first one, my personal favorite would be downward dog with alternate calf stretches. So it helps lengthen the back, hamstring, and calf. And this is especially when you have a long day after heels, your calves are tight, your back may be aching. And then on rest days, standing calf raises help to improve your calf strength. The other thing that we went through earlier on would be the tower scrunches for intrinsic muscle strengthening. So with all that said, I mean, I don't intend to portray dancing in heels in a bad light. I personally love dancing in heels, and I feel it gives you this additional height, improves confidence, and helps create a bit of a toned physique appearance. And working out in heels does require additional balance and comes from quite a bit of strong core as well as a challenge, more challenge than barefoot when you try and coordinate and move. Now, the quality of floors can also vary widely, and sometimes floor can be too slippery or sticky. So the best is to pick your shoes that best fit, that best match the floor. So I'm going to just run through how to dance on bad floors. So if the floor is too slippery, you can consider apply castor oil. So dab a small amount over the sole and then let it dry for a minute. It is generally safe for sweet shoes. Hairspray is also a good temporary fix. If all else fails, try dabbing a bit of water on your soles, but try not to overdo it. But a small amount shouldn't ruin your shoes. If the floor is too sticky, you can stretch foot liners over the socks, over the sole of your shoes. And if you're dancing outdoors on uneven, rough or bumpy concrete floors, the above may not work for you. And so you may try with a masking tape or duct tape over your soles, which will help to make your shoes more slippery but protect the feet from being roughed up on the rough streets. You may also need to change the way you dance, especially in heels. For slippery floors, you want to take smaller steps and put more weight into the step and get low to improve your balance. For sticky floors, then try and pivot less. Pick your feet up whenever you can and place it in a new spot. You really want to try and avoid twisting your feet on the floor, as the increased torque can be bad for your knees. Right, so that's done with heels. And in my next section, we're going to move on to training shoes.
All right, before we move on to the next section, maybe we'll do the next poll before we learn about everything else. So this poll, the question is, do you use your running shoes for dancing and vice versa? Yes, a new question. Okay, let's give everyone a minute. Okay, everyone should be ready. And the next question, maybe we'll just pull up the next question really quick since we addressed the floor, is, oh wow, no running shoes. That means most of you use heels, is it? Come my heels class. Okay, sorry, that was a bad segue. Okay, yes, and the next question would be, what kind of floor do you dance on? So let's pull it up. Where's the admin? Reina. Can we have
Leave
the
that
next
questions
question?
for later.
Oh, for later? Okay,
Vivian's
sorry.
gonna speak about it, right? Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, moving on. Yay.
Okay, so it seems many of you use running shoes to dance. So well, let's go through it. So let's run through the difference between running shoes and training shoes. They may look similar, but there are a few key differences. Running shoes are meant for linear movement, and the midsoles are generally more cushioned and comfortable. Training shoes are meant for side-to-side movement, lateral movements, multi-directional, and hence the midsole tends to be more firm for more support and stability. The outsole, if you see here as well, is different. There tends to be an extended outsole for training shoes for extra support that helps with lateral and side-to-side movements, whereas the outsoles for the running shoes are generally kept within the sole of the feet. Running shoes also tend to have a higher heel drop to help with forward momentum, while training shoes have lower heel drop to put you closer to the ground and enable you to pivot. So what are training shoes generally used for? It's for a large range of movement, cutting, stopping, braking, stopping, changing of direction, and used for dance. The other features of a good pair of shoes would also be a spin spot. So a spin spot is a round spot on the bottom of your sole that allows you to safely pivot on the ball of your feet to reduce torquing your knees. And this is especially good for those who require to spin or turn quite a bit during their choreography. In addition, this shoe should be lightweight, breathable, flexible with good traction. And there are a few types of shoes that are quite good. So I'm just going to run through some of this, but you are free to choose your type of shoes really. So first, Block Boost. It's made of sweet, synthetic mesh, lightweight and breathable with a lacing system for support. The Capizio Fierce Dance sneakers is also lightweight, breathable, made of mesh with synthetic leather with reinforced soles here. So you can see an outsole right here. This tool tends to offer more flexibility as there is a split sole, so a gap in between to allow you for a beautiful point, but may lack a little bit of an arch support. The Rika Tenacity sneakers then have heel guidance that provides extra lateral support, and there's a Velcro strap across the midfoot that customizes a more secure feet. The Fuego shoes then provides a dual pivot point under the ball of the feet and at the heel to facilitate seamless spins. So if you do a lot of maybe salsa, or if you Zumba, anything that requires a lot more turns in your choreography, then these shoes may be beneficial. I mean, you know,
Whoa.
our shoes in spin sports are pretty important if you want to do things like this. So now, what happens if you work with the wrong shoes? So technically, you're still able to perform the move, but there is an increased risk of injury. So for those who have been using running shoes for dance, beware, because the use of running shoes to do dance has an increased risk of ankle sprains and knee injuries. It doesn't allow side to side motions as much, and it's more cushioned, so you don't get much support in the feet. On the other hand, if you use your training shoes for running, for short distances, you're able to manage. But because of the lack of cushioning in these training shoes, there can be an increased risk of plantar fasciitis, which is heel pain, and stress fractures. There is also lowered performance. So if you use your running shoes to do plyometrics, like jumps, squats, turns, there is generally not much grip and traction. And if you use your training shoes to run, it may be hard for you to increase mileage and your speed, leading to lower performance. So I hope all of you who have gone through this talk will be able to differentiate between running shoes and training shoes. And for those who have been using running shoes as training shoes, think again and try out training shoes. You may feel the difference and you may be a convert after that. So in summary, I'd like to end by saying that the foot is often one of the most neglected part of our body, yet it means so much to a dancer. A lot more tender loving care is needed for your foot, and finding good and suitable footwear. As for ballet slippers, full sole supports the arch and is recommended for beginners or children. Split sole shoes help to accentuate the arch and is recommended for advanced dancers with better balance and flexibility. We went through 5 tips to improve your arches. So we went through it: the doming, the wristed step plantar flexion, the piano toes, the toe scrunching, and the technique to point with a relaxed foot. And I hope that was useful. And footwear tends to exacerbate the underlying foot deformity rather than acting as a primary cause. We went through tips to look out for when buying heels for the first time. So look for lower heel height, about 2 inch, and then work up. Larger heel thickness, good support, proper fit with toes just at the edge of the shoe as you stand and fit in. Pack hairspray, masking tape, and socks in your dance bag, and these tools can come in handy when navigating bad flooring. Running shoes should not be used for dancing. And I end here with my favorite quote: finding the best pair of shoes is like finding a life partner. Sometimes it's trial and error. So thanks for listening in. I will now pass the time to Vivien.
Okay, hello, can you all hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, good. Okay, so I'll be talking first about point shoes, and then I'll be talking about flooring. So I know there's a whole bunch of questions in the Q&A and also in the chat. So some of the flooring questions that is there I will actually answer those questions later. Otherwise, we'll try and answer the questions at the end. Okay. Yeah, if you have any burning questions, just type it in there. Okay. So yes. Mandy ended her last section saying that finding a pair of good shoes is like, you know, finding a life partner. I had one friend who told me that finding a good pair of point shoe was harder than finding a life partner, which is kind of true lah. Huh? Okay, so as point shoes is something that, you know, all sort of young ballet girls, when they, you know, start learning ballet at 4 years old, 6 years old, whatever, and everyone just kind of aspires to go on point. Adult ballet learners included, you know, they just want to be able to go on point. It's almost like a rite of passage of ballet. Okay, so then comes the question, but you know, if you look at it and from, you know, most outsiders' point of view, everyone is kind of a bit like, point shoes, are you sure they're really good for you? You know, they must be really bad for your feet to be standing on your toes. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about point shoes, you know, what it does, how it affects your feet. Okay, so first things first, at what age should you be going on point? So generally the recommendation is around 12 years old. Okay, so that's but then again, it's, you know, it's chronological versus biological age as well. So if you look at your growing up, you also know that, you know, not every biological versus biological age, preferably, you know, you have gone to you have developed physically, you know, your body's physical development. The reason why we don't want you starting too early, okay, is that, okay, so if you look at this slide, the first slide here, okay, that's a 4-year-old, that's an 11-year-old, and that's the foot of an adult. And if you see all these holes, okay, in the bones, those are the growth plates, the epiphysis, and it's just because the bones are not fully formed yet. Okay, so what happens if you put a student on point too early, okay, is that when these growth plates haven't fused completely, usually coupled with poor technique, then you can cause these growth plates to shift. And if the growth plates are shifted, then you have problems because then it doesn't grow properly, it doesn't grow straight, and then that can cause deformity. Okay, so that's one issue. Okay, so in terms of level of training, so obviously you have to have trained for a good number of years before you're able to go on point. So before you reach a certain age, before you have the technical capability to actually go on point. Okay, so in Singapore, commonly everyone trains in the sort of RAD or CSTD syllabus. So if you are following that syllabus, chances are you would have done, you know, 6, 7, 8 maybe years of ballet before you go on point. If you're not following that syllabus, so we're looking at some others, Russian syllabus, Chinese or whatever, the recommendation is kind of at least 4 years of serious training. So 4 years of training at least 2 to 3 times, at least 3 times a week actually, okay, to be able to develop that amount of technical capability, age aside, just technical capability to be able to go on point. Okay. So the other thing that we need to look out for, okay, as to deciding whether this person is ready to go on point, okay, is also flexibility, okay, alignment and strength. So flexibility, you can see from the picture, and so you can have, you know, some people have very archy, what Dr. Mandy called banana feet. Oops, sorry. And some people's, you know, the feet is not so arched, and then some is, you know, quite fairly straight. Okay, so if you're looking at these pictures, okay, I would say these 3 pictures, yes, the chance of, you know, being able to go on point and being able to successfully dance on point are all quite high. You know, they're not bad. Okay, you've got, the problem comes when you've got someone who's arch. Basically, when they point their feet, it goes there and then it goes up there. And no matter what they do, it just doesn't go down. Okay, that's a flexibility issue. Sad to say, these people probably won't be able to get on point because in the point shoes, they will not be able to get up onto the box and onto the platform of the shoe. Okay, this nice. Okay, they do and it's gonna. I'm talking about the angle of the foot when it's pointed. Okay, so ideally you want to be pointing it straight or even not too much fishing out to the other side. Okay, so if someone is doing this in their normal barefoot or in their normal ballet slippers, this is a good indication that this person probably should not be on point. Okay, so what happens when they go on point if their foot is always pointing outwards or pointing inwards is this is what they look like. They're not sitting on the floor, and this is very dangerous. There's a very high chance of ankle sprain or even breaking the bones at the ankle or in the foot. Okay, this is a common mechanism for a lateral ankle sprain or a fracture of the fifth metatarsal, which is at this area. Okay, so ideally you want to be pointing straight so that when you're up on point, everything is in line. You are in the platform is on the floor. Strength. Okay, so okay. Okay, so the other thing would be strength. Strength is basically just doing a single leg tiptoe. Okay, so for all dancers, you should be able to do 20 at least single leg tiptoe. Okay, without getting too fatigued, you should be able to get up to full height of your single leg tiptoe. Okay. You can hold on to something for balance, but you should have the calf strength to do 20 single leg tiptoes at least. So yeah, you guys can go and try it after you're done, when we're done with the talk. Okay, and then we talk about so something else about alignment. Okay, so this is remember Dr. Mandy mentioned just now about pointing far rather than pointing downwards. Okay, so that's about not scrunching the toes. Okay, so I put this in to show that yes, so even when you're in your point shoes, that is a very important thing. Okay, when you're in the point shoes, your toes should be pointing far rather than pointing down. The toes should be straight. Okay, so what happens is if you're in the habit of pointing with your toes scrunched up, when you're on point, then all your weight would actually be on your toenails because that would be the point that is closest to the floor. And if you're pointing with this part where your toenail is on the floor instead of the tip of your toes, that's a surefire way to get all your bruised toenails and your toenails dropping off. Okay, so yes, the long toes are important. It's especially important in point work. Okay, so yes, so back to the question of when should you get up on point. George Balanchine famously said that there was no reason to get a young dancer up on point if she couldn't do anything when she got up there. Okay, so being able to stand in your shoes is not useful at all if you can't actually dance in them. Okay, so yeah, this is just a picture I thought was very funny because this is true. This is where we are at, and everyone is trying to get a nicer and archier point, and sooner or later we will be there. Okay, so let's talk about fitting of point shoes. So how do you know which shoe is good for you? Okay, so point shoes, like any other shoes in the market. Okay, so like your running shoes, there's your Nike, your Adidas, your Pumas, whatever brand. And one of the questions we always get as point shoe fitters is, what is the best shoe? So the correct answer, the real answer is that there is no such thing as the best shoe. Okay, there is the best shoe for you, but there is no such thing as the best shoe in general. Okay, it's the same as, you know, asking what is the best running shoe. And if you think that there is a best running shoe, then it will be like thinking that, you know, if I wore Pumas, I would run like Usain Bolt, which is obviously not true. No matter what shoe I wear, I'm never gonna run like Usain Bolt. Okay, so there are multiple brands available. Okay, so when we're looking at point shoe fitting, these are the many things that we're looking at. Okay, so we're looking at the shape of the toes, the length of the toes in relation to the length of the whole foot, how compressible the feet is, so sideways can you squish the foot. Okay, foot profile height, which is sort of the height of your foot when you look from the side. Okay, the type of arch you have, so whether, you know, you very high arch, very low arch, very is it a flexible arch or is it stiff? Okay, so it can just because you have a high arch doesn't mean that it's a flexible arch. Okay, you can have the arch is low but flexible. You can also have an arch that is very high and very stiff. Okay, and then there's Hue Shape as well. So each combination of this then decides, you know, what kind of shoe to get. Whether you need a shoe with a very wide platform or very narrow platform, whether the box should be wide or narrow, whether the profile height, so that when you look at it from sideways, whether it's high or it's low. The vamp length, this is where the shoe ends. Okay? So if you have a vamp that is too low and your toes are very long, okay, then when you go up on point, then the head of your metatarsals, which is the knuckles will stick out of the shoe and you risk falling over the shoe. Okay? But if you have a vamp that is too high, it goes too far past your toes, then it makes it very difficult to roll up through any point. Okay? So and then Sheng Strength. Okay, so there's again there is the sort of misconception that if you got very if you got a very strong if you got a very arched foot, you need a strong shank, and if you've got a very not so archy feet, you need a very weak or soft shank. Again, that is not necessarily true. If you've got very archy feet, but it's strong, technically you could control any shank. Okay? It's just that certain shanks might last longer than others. Okay? But it's not always that, you know, if you have very archy feet, you have to have the strongest shank. It doesn't always work that way. Okay, Hue Shape does affect heel height and width. Some brands have got options of high or low heel. Okay, or different models. Some models have slightly wider heel and some models have slightly narrower heel. You can usually use the drawstring to sort of correct the heel a little bit. Okay, so and then accessories. So after finding the so-called best shoe for your foot, there's still different accessories that can be used. Okay, so the first thing is ribbons. Ribbons alone, there is your normal satin ribbon, and then there is your elastic ribbon, so where the whole ribbon is slightly stretchy. Okay, and then you've got these combination ribbons. So if you look at the one on the picture, okay, this ribbon has a elastic, so it's satin and then there's an elastic bit and then satin again. Okay, so this ribbon is good for people with where they use the normal ribbons and it causes irritation at the Achilles, at the back of the heel. Okay? Or if they've got some old Achilles injury, they're predisposed to inflammation of the Achilles, and rubbing a hard ribbon on it might make it worse. So having an elastic area there will decrease that irritation. Okay, and then there's darning and anti-slip. So there are various methods. The old method of darning was to sew the thread around the shoe, around the platform. Okay, nowadays there's also anti-slip where you can sort of glue on. Some of it is made from thread, some of it is made from suede. Okay, toe pads itself, you've got various different materials and types. Okay, so depending on when you guys started doing point work, or it shows off your age, shows off my age. So when I started doing point work, this was what we used. Now the common one would be something like this. So they're made of silicone. This lasts a lot of times longer than this. This was made of wool. After you wear it for a few times, it just squishes out completely and there's just not much padding left. This is made of silicone gel. So it lasts a much longer time. And this is something that is very new in the market. It's a moldable, it claims to be, it's supposed to be a moldable toe pad. So you need to wear it, put your foot in, pour this thing in, and then put your foot in, and then let it harden. So it's supposed to create a toe pad that fits exactly to your foot. So it's supposed to take up exactly where there's space inside. Okay, this sounds very good theoretically, but I haven't had the chance to try it. I don't know anyone who personally has tried it. So yeah, I'm also curious to find out whether how good this thing is and whether it would be the next thing in point shoe toe pads. Hey, and then there are other things like jelly toes. So jelly toes are sort of mini toe pads. Okay, so for some people, they don't need a full toe pad. They only need to protect one or two toes. Or for some people, they just need the toe pad plus extra protection in a particular toe. Usually, I would recommend using it if you tend to get bunions in one toe in particular. For most people, it's the big toe or the little toe. So for some people, they wear a toe pad and then just a extra jelly toe on only the little toe. Okay. There's also shoe fillers, which is like a thin piece that sort of just goes on top here inside the point shoes. Okay, so for some people who just have a bit too much extra space inside the shoe, so when they go on point, they tend to sink a little bit into the shoe. Okay, but going down one size makes it too small, so they're sort of in between widths. Then a shoe filler works quite well. It stops you from sinking, so it stops the toe from taking too much weight. Okay, toe spacers. Mandy talked about this just now when she was talking about Hallux valgus as well. Okay, so if you've got a very big gap in between, a toe spacer can help to sort of create a straighter alignment. But take note, because this takes up quite a bit of space. So if you intend to wear your point shoes with a toe spacer, then you have to fit the point shoes with the toe spacer. Okay, so don't buy a shoe that you fitted it perfectly and then you decide to add the toe spacer in, because then it's probably too tight. Then you're gonna get a little bit of numbness in your toes. Okay, and then there's just sort of plasters and tapes, usually for like particular toe or just the bunion area where you tend to get abrasions or blisters. Okay. So for point shoes, again, feet are like thumbprint. Everyone in the world has different feet. Even the 2 feet are different. Most people have very slightly different size feet. For people with significantly different size feet, they actually need to buy two different pairs of shoes. That's usually half a size apart. Okay? For point shoes, because the shoes come without left and right, so none of the shoe gets wasted if you buy 2 pairs of shoes. Okay, so then comes the question of breaking in. Okay, so to break or not to break in point shoes, it's partly dependent on the brand and the model. Okay, so the more older traditional brands and models like Fritz and most of your block models, they do require some amount of breaking in, the normal Grishko models as well. But models, brands like Gainer Minden and also newer models like the Grishko Dream Point, okay, these two and them are a few more in the market. They actually don't require breaking in, or you actually really should not break them in. Okay, so the reason is that instead of being made from cardboard and glue, so the traditional shoes, the sole, okay, and the box is made from cardboard and glue, and you need to kind of soften it a little bit to make it mold to your feet. Okay, but in these models of shoes, this area, so you can see that pink thing and the blue thing there, okay, that's polymer. It's a soft, malleable plastic, okay, and the shoes generally come already pre-arched. So you can't break them because they are plastic, even though they are malleable, they are plastic. So if you try to break them in, you would break the plastic and there goes the shoe. Okay, and these shoes are about close to $200, so you really don't want to do that to your shoes. Okay. So the point of breaking in is basically to mold the shoe to the feet. Okay. So the best way to break them in, okay, is to kind of wear them, okay, and kind of walk around in them a little bit. So what happens is that your the body heat, okay, produced by your feet, and the sweat produced by your feet then softens the shoe a little bit. Okay, so once it's a little bit soft, then you can make it. Then you can use your hand, okay, to sort of soften it slightly at the highest point of the arch. That's to make the shank mold to the arch, to your sole of your feet. Okay, and then to soften the box a little bit, so to flatten the box a little bit, so that it's more like your feet rather than a square box, because obviously your foot is not square. Okay, and then after you do that, again, wear the shoe, walk around in them, do some grand pliés to make to get the sole a little bit more malleable, roll through them point to point, and then do a little bit of relevé. Okay, so that should be the only thing you're doing when you break in the point shoes. You really shouldn't be breaking it. Okay? So yeah, I think.
Viv, can I
Yes.
ask a question?
Yep.
So last time when I was going on point, right, we used to do things like making our friends with very, very high arch break our shoes for us, or put them at the door and squish the shoes, like open and close the shoe. I think you remember.
Yes.
FYI, we used to do ballet together, me and Vivien, okay? So shout out to Justina, my point shoe breaker, because I'm basically fat. I used to be flat foot, as flat as can be. So I used to have a lot of trouble. So do you recommend doing that, or do you recommend more breaking it for your own foot so that you also train your own strength?
Yes. Okay. So the thing about breaking it in the door, that one is a bit overkill, basically. I would say that's just an overkill. Okay. So you should either use your hands, depending on how much breaking in you need. Use your hands or kind of step on it. Put a towel over the shoe, or put the shoe inside a sock and then kind of step on it. Okay, so that you kind of soften the box a little bit. But yeah, the door is really an overkill. I don't know why we did that. And then the thing about getting your friends with a high arch to break it in for you is, yes, you will get the shank softer faster. The problem with that is that your friend's highest point of the arch is probably different from yours.
Definitely.
So yes, it will get it soft, but it may not mold to your feet very well. Yeah, so that's the downside of it. Okay. So you want it to be as molded to your feet as possible. Yeah. Okay. And plus, like you said, you kind of train your own strength as you do it.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing too.
It takes so long. Okay, never mind. Besides the point.
It's part of the training.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay. So point shoe, the lifespan of a point shoe, is roughly 20 hours of wear. Okay, so I know you hear all these stories about how, professional dancers, their shoes only last like one performance. Okay, so one of the reasons that happens is that these professional dancers, once they get their shoe, they completely break it into the point where they can perform on it straight away. Okay, which is why then once they perform on it, after that day of rehearsal and performance, the shoe is probably gone. So they probably get 4 hours of wear out of the shoe. Okay, so they really, really break it into that point. Okay, but for most of us, if we are not professionals, or if the company doesn't provide our shoe, then we probably should not do that. Okay. So otherwise, a point shoe roughly is about 20 hours of wear. So it depends on how often you're wearing it and how long each time you wear it. So if you're wearing it for just 10 or 15 minutes at the end of class, in a 2 times a week, then your shoe can probably last about 6 months to maybe 9 months. Okay. But if you're wearing your shoe for the whole class, which is an hour and a half, then that's going to be a lot shorter. Okay. Just due to sweating in the shoe, okay, a shoe takes 24 to 48 hours to dry fully. So if you're dancing consecutive days, then you should have more than one pair of shoe for rotation. That just allows the shoe to dry fully before you wear it again, which extends the lifespan of the shoe. If it's not dry yet and then you go and wet it again, it's just going to soften faster. Okay. In between wearing the shoe, you can use all sorts of things to dry it. So, the newspaper, paper towel, that's the easiest method, or, silica gel. I know people who put their shoe in a dry box for cameras. Okay? So it serves the same purpose. Basically, it dries up the moisture. Okay? Otherwise, yeah, just put your shoe in the sun near the window with a fan blowing on it, and that serves the same purpose. One thing that you should always take note of is don't keep your shoe in a plastic bag. A lot of brands sell the shoe in a plastic bag, like a Ziploc plastic bag for that matter. Okay, so if you wear your shoe, it is wet, you put it in a Ziploc plastic bag and you seal it up, then you're just gonna keep the moisture inside, and your shoe is not going to dry. Okay, so it was found in a study, okay, that dancing, so doing bourrées or kurus in point shoes that had gone through more than 20 hours of wear. So these were very soft shoes already. Okay, caused significantly greater midfoot flexion and ankle plantar flexion. So basically, the shoes were so soft they were not holding the body up anymore. Okay, so it caused more bending in the foot and in the ankle. So that puts more pressure on the whole foot and also especially at the back of the ankles. Okay, so that leads to more overuse injuries. Okay, so some of the common problems with wearing point shoes. Okay, so I'll talk about a few of them. Okay, so one of them is Achilles tendinopathy. Okay, so that's a tendon pain at the back of the foot. Okay, so this can be caused by point work, but also it can be caused by excessive amounts of jumps and releves. Okay, with all tendinopathy conditions, it usually comes about not so much because of too much dancing or too much activity, but more because you've gone through a period of rest, okay, or you do sort of twice a week, and then suddenly for some reason or other you increased it significantly to say 5 or 6 times a week. Or a lot of times when we see this is when people are busy with exams or school or work or something, and then they take 3 weeks off, 4 weeks off, where O levels just ended. Okay, so they take a month off and then suddenly they come back to dancing and then they go straight into a dance camp that is 6 days straight away. Okay, and yeah, so doing things like this actually causes tendons to act up because the tendons are not used to that amount of loading. Okay, so poor alignment also makes it worse. Okay, so tendons are meant to be straight. Okay, so tendons can take a lot of load if the load is going straight through. Okay, but if you're sickling or you're fishing too much when you're on point or on demi-point, okay, then the tendon becomes slanted, okay, or curved. Okay, and when it's slanted or curved, it's not capable of taking as much load, and that causes the tendon to flare up. Okay, so recovery is what we term as relative rest. Okay, so you need to cut down the amount you're doing to give the tendon a chance to recover. Okay, you may need to limit the amount of pointing and flexing that you do, okay, just to the amount where it doesn't cause too much pain. You just want to give it a chance to recover. Okay, usually you have to stop jumping for a bit of time, right? And then you may have to decrease the amount of point work you're doing. But again, it's quite pain is determined by the amount of pain and the amount of sort of swelling that's occurring at the area. Okay. I'll talk about Flexors, Hallucis, Longus, Tendinopathy. So this one is special because it's like what we call a dancer's tendinopathy. Generally, no other people get this. Okay? It's caused by the FHL tendon. Okay, so the FHL tendon comes through the inside of the ankle and it goes to your big toe. Okay, so it's caused usually by weak big toe flexion, okay, or clawing of the toes. So again, what we said just now about scrunching of the toes. Okay, so you shouldn't be scrunching the toes too much. When you scrunch the toes, you're overusing this tendon, so which shouldn't happen at all. Okay. Again, when that happens, usually, so in severe cases, at the start, usually you may get a bit of swelling in the middle of the ankle, and you can get some clicking at this area, especially when you scrunch and unscrunch your toe. Okay. Again, recovery, usually no point work. Sorry, typo there. No point work, no jumps, and usually no grand plie as well. Reason being, when you do a grand plie, this part comes into contact with the flexor retinaculum, okay, and that increases the amount of irritation. So usually you have to stop grand plie for a period of time as well. Okay, so posterior impingement, again, this is generally a dancer's thing. It's caused by pointing to the end of the range. So you dancers always, trying to point their feet as much as possible, and that causes impingement at the back of the heel. Okay, so the impingement can be soft tissue, or the impingement can be due to an extra bone called ostrigonium. Okay, so again, it depends on treatment. It depends on what is caused by. Okay, so usually if it's soft tissue impingement, just stopping that pointing to the end of the range for a period of time, let the inflammation settle down, that should be okay, and then do some strengthening. Okay. On the other hand, if it's caused by an extra bone called the ostrigonium, and depending on how big that extra bone is as well, surgery may be required to remove that extra bone if there is a need to, you want to continue dancing. Okay. Then obviously recovery, no point work, because point work requires you to point to the end of the range. So Dr. Mandy already talked about most of this. I just want to say in relation to point work, okay, again, Bunions and Hallux Valgus is not really caused by point work. It's so same as in the case with heels. Okay, it's not really caused by point work, but point work, especially if there is poor technique or if the shoe doesn't fit very well, then it can be caused by point. Okay, but it's not point work itself that causes it. In a lot of dancers, I would say it's actually caused more by rolling than point work. Okay, so if you roll, when you're trying to stand in, 180 degrees first position, or trying to keep your both foot together in a fifth position, okay, when you roll, then you put a lot of pressure on this part of the foot, okay, and that is actually what is more likely to flare up a bunion, okay, than point work itself. Okay, if the shoe, provided the shoe is fitted properly and the pressure when you wear your shoes is evenly distributed around the foot. Okay, if the shoe is not fitted properly and the pressure is all here, then yes, it's likely to cause Hallux valgus. Okay, in terms of treatment, okay, you can tape it. Okay, so this taping, it pulls the big toe out. Okay, so it keeps that alignment. Okay, so it gets this to go up this way. That's alignment. Okay, you can put a toe spacer, which we mentioned just now. Okay, you can use a donut foam or to offload the pressure on the painful part. Okay. Blisters, this is a fairly common one. Again, if the shoe is very well fitted and you've got, sort of the paddings in the right place, then you shouldn't get blisters that much. That being said, most people when they first start point work will get some blisters simply because the skin and the toes are not used to it. Okay. By right, you shouldn't touch a blister. Okay, so if you don't touch it and you don't do anything to it, it will dry up slowly. The problem is when you need to dance again and you need to put your foot in a point shoe again, then an unburst blister is very painful and you risk it bursting inside the shoe, which makes it a lot worse. Okay, so if you need to dance again and you've got a blister, kind of the best way to do it is just to poke a tiny hole with a needle. Okay, so don't cut the skin out completely. Just poke a tiny hole and drain the blister. Okay, and then cover it with a second skin. Okay, so it just provides some protection. Okay, you take away the pressure of the blister and it provides protection for the skin. Okay. Ingrown toenails, that's another one. Another common issue, usually caused by shoes that are too tight. Okay, the other reason that ingrown toenails happen is because the toenails are not properly cut. Okay, so it pushes the nail against the skin and then it causes it to grow into the skin. Okay, so this is something I learned quite late in life as well. Okay, which is that the toenail should be cut straight so that it will allow it to grow outwards. You shouldn't be cutting it curved because then it causes it to grow into the skin. Okay, yeah, again, if it's not infected, it's not a problem. It's painful when it starts sort of growing to the area. You just need to cut it off. Okay, the problem is when it gets infected and the area gets swollen. Okay, usually treated with antibiotics, just cutting off the nail and treated with antibiotics. Surgery as a last resort, you have to look for podiatrist for that. Okay. Yeah, and so some of the exercises that are good for sort of point work related things, that's so most of this Dr. Mandy mentioned earlier, okay, doming, piano toes, calf raises, and calf stretches or home roll. Hey, I realize I'm actually quite out of time. I will talk about the floor. So flooring. Okay, so the basic of it, okay, the flooring, there's two sort of layers in your floor. Okay, so there's the subfloor and then there is the surface. Okay, so the subfloor, in your commercial subfloor, okay, so in your commercial, your residential subfloor, your floor generally is concrete. Okay, but for dance, the recommendation is to use sprung floor. So we'll talk about what these are. Okay, so so flooring, yeah. So concrete subfloor. Okay, so most modern flooring, not made for dance or commercial, residential, etc., are all made of concrete. Okay, so concrete obviously is got no shock absorption. It has no bounce. Okay, and there's a very high risk of overuse injuries. This is due to excessive ground reaction forces. Okay, so if you jump on a concrete floor, then that force of landing comes back at you. Okay, and that leads to things like stress fractures and tendon issues. Okay, if you fall really hard, then there's a high risk of fractures from the fall because the floor doesn't absorb any of that force. It has to go somewhere. Okay, so chances are it goes to your bones. Okay, on the other hand, okay, so what is a sprung floor? Okay, a sprung floor is when the floor, the subfloor layer has got a basket weave pattern of foam backing or rubber feet. Okay, most sprung floors are made of a combination of these traditional and modern methods. Okay, then on top of that, there is plywood. Okay, and then there's a final wood surface that you see on the top. Okay, this whole thing actually requires a depth of about 10 centimeters. Okay, so if you think about your most of your dance studios that were not made for dance, or I would even say a lot of your studios in shopping malls, if the height of the floor is the same as the height of the floor outside in the corridor, then chances are that that floor is actually not sprung. It's basically the original floor, and they just put a layer of wood or a vinyl surface, which is the dance mat over it. Okay, so those floors laid on top of concrete. Sprung floor. Okay, so the thing with sprung floor is that it provides shock absorption. Okay, it allows for rebound. Okay, and that because of the shock absorption, it greatly reduces injuries. Okay, especially severe injuries. So when you land on the floor, the force dissipates. Okay, so it reduces the amount of injuries. Okay, so that's for the subfloor. Okay, then comes okay. So there have been a few studies done on the flooring. So on a sprung floor, okay, so on sprung floor, landing from a jump, it actually decreased the stiffness of the landing leg. Okay, so showing that the force of the landing was absorbed by the surface. Okay, so it does not go back up the leg and to the body. Okay, landing on a sprung floor also showed a decrease in maximum knee angle and knee flexion moment and negative ankle velocity. Okay, so basically when you land, it doesn't require you to sort of bend that much because the force gets absorbed, so you don't bend that much and fast. Okay, and then comes to performance surface. Okay, so this is the top layer of the floor that you are dancing on. Okay, so there are various things. Carpet is one of those things that I think we all knew was an issue, that you should not be dancing on carpet. Okay, but I realized that thanks to 2020 and COVID and a lot of people dancing at home, especially in the Western countries, in the cold countries, okay, actually there were actually people trying to dance on carpet. Okay, and then in Singapore, I would say, more commonly we just have, sort of tile, wood, some form of engineered vinyl flooring, okay, or laminate flooring. Okay, and this vinyl, this would be the sort of dance mat that we term as dance mat. Okay, so what to look out for in a performance surface? Okay, so traction is the first thing. Okay, so you don't want it too slippery, then you risk falls happening. Too sticky, then your foot gets caught when you try and turn, and you risk twisting injuries to the ankle or knee. Okay, a lot of dance studios are made such that it caters for various different types of dance. Okay, so the floor is kind of an in-between for, say, street dance and also contemporary, okay, for example. Okay, so the difference in requirements should then be catered for by using different shoes. So if you use the correct shoe on a sort of okay floor, okay, that's great. That's sort of, in a way, as good as it gets. Okay, the problem is when you use, poor footwear on poor floor. Okay, so that's one. The other one is the noise and the sound that the floor makes, okay, and how much maintenance is required. So a dance floor, especially a vinyl floor, so dance mats require a good amount of maintenance. It requires special cleaning technique. And you don't want too much dust surface of the floor as well. Dust actually makes it very slippery. A lot of cleaning, apart from the floor a lot, and gets very dirty. Yeah. A lot more. So control prevention with dance mats is a little bit too sticky, which then can be countered by point shoes, rosin, or using a little bit of water or hairspray, like Mandy said earlier. Okay. On the other hand, for tap dance, okay, you actually want it to be fairly slippery. Okay, so the floor for tap dance and the floor for ballet is actually quite different. Okay, you actually want it fairly slippery. That's to allow for the fast movements of the taps. Okay? And the floor has to be quite hard. Okay, so vinyl dance mats are too soft. Okay, so if you tap on a vinyl dance mat, you're not going to be really able to tap on it. Okay, the tap dance needs to have fairly hard wood, okay, to tolerate the tapping. Okay, so ballet, ballet floor needs to have high resiliency, so that's shock absorption. Okay, so because ballet, there's a lot of multiple big jumps, especially for the men. Okay, so you need to be able to absorb a lot of force. Tap dance as well, you need to be able to absorb a lot of force. They don't do that much jumping, but they are constantly striking the floor. Even though it's not a lot of force, but they do it so many times, there's a lot of accumulated ground reaction force. Okay. Then comes another point of contrast, which is in tap dance, you want the floor to be noisy. And you want to be able to hear every single tap on the floor. Okay, and this is as opposed to ballet, which you want the floor to make as little noise as possible. Okay, especially on point, nobody wants to hear you landing with on your point shoes. Okay, and sort of for both and actually kind of for anything, you need something with a fairly crack-free surface. So you can't be like, especially for tap, you can't be after tapping for a few hours and then you start getting cracks in the floor. Then that's quite horrible. Okay, so yes, yeah, just a little picture of someone dancing on carpet. So this became a reality for a lot of people, which is really not the best thing to do. Okay. So dancing, especially at home. Okay, so what do you do if you've got poor flooring and you don't have much of a choice about it? Okay, so one of the things is to buy dance mats. Okay, this can be bought online. It can be bought in Singapore. Okay, so at least if you can't change your subfloor, okay, so if you have concrete floor, you're not going to be able to change that. Okay, but if you cannot change your subfloor, you can't quite change you can at least change your performance surface, okay, so that you've got suitable slip resistance. So it takes away one problem. Okay, you can use a yoga mat to absorb some of the force. That may be useful for jumping, okay, for jumping a little bit, I would say. Okay, but yoga mats tend to be really, really non-slip. Okay, so you can't practice turns on a yoga mat. Okay, then that's too sticky and you're gonna get a lot of ankle and knee injuries. Okay, if you need to practice jumps, okay, so wearing running shoes or training shoes to practice jumps, okay, so it wouldn't allow you to point your toes or point your feet to as much as you need to in ballet, but it still allows you to train so the calf and the core sort of cardiovascular workout you get from jumping. Okay, and if anything, okay, this in terms of shock absorption, if you really wanted to do a lot of jumping, again, go fitness corner with a sort of soft, spongy kind of feel, the rubber floor. That allows you to practice more jumps without getting too fatigued easily, okay, without, yeah. Okay, so that's the end of my presentation. I'm going to unshare my screen. Okay, I'm going to unshare my screen. I know we are slightly behind time and we probably should be taking some questions.
Yes. Okay, thank you, Vivien, for your presentation. Just really quick, I just wanted to address one of the questions that I feel we maybe did not address as much, which was I know somebody answered something about do you have a specific brand of shoes to recommend for street dancing, for example, street jazz or girl style? Because I feel like we've talked a lot about a lot of like things that require like pointing and a lot of technical movement, like these kind of movements like rising, so like ballet, contemporary, Latin, and wearing heels dance. So like for street dance, like a lot of my friends, for example, they're like b-boys or hip-hop dancers, they tend to use like shoes like these. They are like really really flat and like Vans, you know, they don't really have like a lot of cushioning and stuff. So maybe like we can address either the implications of that, and like for street dance and stuff, maybe we can recommend like some certain kinds of shoes for this particular question.
Okay, so regarding the street dance, I didn't quite give a brand, but I think generally it depends on what suits best. So the Fuego shoes do seem to fit the specifications for anybody who wants to do hip hop or street dance. And one of the pictures that I showed, the Rika Tenacity sneakers, I think
Yes.
this is quite good ankle support and foot support. So
Yep.
if you're b-boying, that will be a good option. Yeah, so it really depends on what you're looking for. In response to that question, then really go for the lightweight. It fits comfortably, and what kind of support you need. And if you need to do a lot of spins, then the spin spot as an additional feature on your shoe may be preferable. Yeah,
So
so
would you say you wouldn't recommend something with a super flat sole?
actually it's okay with I mean, the sole can be flat, meaning there's no heel to toe drop, but it has to be with a good stability and support.
Okay.
Yeah.
Side note, would you recommend more like higher so that you can actually like lace it all the way up to your ankles to increase ankle stability, like versus like a lower cut shoe, for example?
Yeah, I guess it really depends on what activities you're doing. So if you look at all the basketball shoes, they tend to be more high cut, and because
Mm-hmm.
prevalence of ankle sprain is higher. So
Mm-hmm.
mostly for dance, if you have quite good technique, and the thing about the high ankle support is it may restrict your movement a little bit with your dorsiflexion. So if you require to do a lot of that in your movement, then you may not like it as much as compared to something that is more flexible. And for the ladies, if you're doing like girl style, street jazz, you may want to have a good point, and then you want to choose something with a split sole that accentuates that movement.
Okay.
Hmm.
Vivien, any questions in the Q&A that you maybe want to address?
Yeah. Okay. Yes, I would because I know that there were a few questions about point, which I will try to just sort of answer them all together. Okay. So two of the questions were about starting point early, and then one when to start point. Okay. So again, like what I said about age. Okay, the age 12 thing is not a magic number. Okay. We know that Russian training and China, they put their kids on point at 9 or 10. Honestly, we don't know. We cannot say for sure that that is going to be really really bad. Okay, so age is just one of the factors. Okay, the other factors is the other things I talked about, like flexibility and technique, okay, and whether they have the strength to hold themselves up on point. Okay, so there's maybe 4 or 5 different factors, and you want to try to achieve majority, if not all of them, before you go up on point. Okay.
Yep.
So the same thing for the adult dancer. So obviously the adult dancer, the age part is out of the question already. Okay, but then you still have to aim to achieve all the other things. So the flexibility, the strength. So flexibility is one thing that as a kid, as a child, you may still be able to train a bit more flexibility. For some adults, you may never achieve that flexibility. Okay, so this is really person to person. It's a really case by case basis. Okay, but I would say that the general answer is there's 4 or 5 different factors, and you want to try to achieve most, if not all of them, before you go on point. Yeah.
Okay. Lastly, my one question is for the both of you. So for my style of dance is heel stance, and commonly, like what you recommended was maybe a 2 inch or 3 inch maximum heel. But for my dancing, usually we tend to do at least 4 inches because we don't want to have to do this all the time because it's very taxing on the Achilles as well as the calf muscle. So we always want to be as high on arch as possible. Are there any exercises that we can do either immediately after or like just to sustain the body so that we don't injure ourselves so easily? Because maybe we wear those heels for like maybe 45 minutes at a time for the span of each class. So is there anything we can do to maybe like lessen the injuries in that sense?
Okay, so I think with the very high heels one, so for example, like
Yeah.
pole dancing or other kinds of
Yes,
dance where you
definitely. Yeah.
wear high heels,
Yeah.
then the option is to actually look at the slope of the heel and to get something with a higher platform, so that with the wedge on top, with the platform on top, the angle of your ankle is actually not
Yeah.
strained as much. In terms of exercise, then because when you're propped up in a plantar flex position for about half an hour, 45 minutes, the calves can go quite tight. So I think cooling down is important. Doing a
Okay.
downward dog with calf stretch where you can actually relieve the back as well.
Okay.
Yeah, child's pose. And then with high heels, sometimes there are risk of ankle sprains because you trip and fall, so you want to maintain a good ankle stability. So
Mm-hmm.
I think for dancers, the double heel
Yeah.
raise and single leg heel raise are something
Yeah.
that is very mundane but needs to be done regularly to ensure that
Okay.
ankle's nice and strong.
Okay. Thank you. Vivian, anything to add or more or less okay?
Um, More or less, I'm sort of answering the question in
Ah,
the
okay.
typing method as well.
Okay, cool. Reina, is there anything else you would like us to address?
Not at all. Thank you all. Thank you for speaking with us today. I think I learned a lot of things, and I hope our attendees learned a lot of things. But I would just like to apologize for overrunning because we have a lot of information we would like to share. Unfortunately, we can't take all the Q&As, but don't worry. If you go to the Q&A section under the answered, our speakers has very kindly typed out the answers for you in the Q&A section. So once we close the webinar, right, actually I'll leave the webinar open for you to look at some of the answers. Okay, but before we go, I would just like to share with you some of the other things. So coming up next, we have a on-beat session, which is a dialogue session with youths who have graduated from art school like SOTA, NAFA, and even overseas schools from Trinity Laban Conservatoire. So there's that. It will be happening on the 19th December. So just take note of our social medias if you're interested. Okay, the next one on my list is actually you're not going to be very foreign about. It's a Escape Dance Science platform. We do bi-monthly articles, and we actually also have videos like warm up, cool down, and also we post our recordings of webinars. So if you want to revisit anything, you can always feel free to do so. It will be both available on our website as well as Scape's Facebook page. Okay. The third one I would like to highlight to all of you is the Dancer Advocacy Group. They have a lot of information on there, especially the dance health resources. Within that list, we have both of our speakers' contact information in there. So we have Vivien information, also Dr. Mandy's information. Now, last but not least, Eco Dancewear has very nicely given us a 10% code. These are some of their brands. Clothing as well. So you can see on the screen, they are kind of like leggings and also workout tops. And the lucky winner for Ika Dancewear will be Licia Chua. So the Ika
Yay!
Dancewear will contact you via Instagram DM for you, and then you can have your communications over from there. Okay, thank you all for joining us. Before I forget, we also need to trouble all of you guys to maybe just help me fill out one survey link so that we can know how we can improve ourselves and also what would you like to hear from us next. Okay, so thank you all. Thank you to my lovely speakers as well. It's great to have Dr. Mandy back, and I hope to see all of you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.